Mom, you're here today.
Yes.
I'm so excited to have you here. Hey guys, welcome to Life at 2030. I almost said the totally wrong. I'm already having mom brain, Mom. Welcome to Life at 2030. We're so glad you guys are here. And Mom, I'm so glad you're here. This is a really cool topic that we have today. But first, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Have you had anything interesting, fun happen lately?
Just life and then trying to avoid the COVID.
I have given you so many assignments this week. Is your brain fried?
My brain is fried and I have been crying for joy learning more about my grandmothers and grandfathers.
So I texted you a couple days ago, maybe 3-4 days ago. Okay, Mom, we're going to talk about Frederika and we're going to talk about Julia. So I need you to read all you can about them and write down the highlights and write down what's interesting and sticks out and have fun. And I did the same, and it has been such an incredible experience. This really truly is where the hearts to the children and the father, how do you say that? The children's hearts and the father's hearts come together.
Right.
And so if you want to learn anything about anyone, as long as it's put up there in Family Search, you can go and click on a name that you want to learn more about. Then there's a memories and a sources section under their name.
And I'm very thankful for those people that put them there.
Aren't you? I'm so grateful too. And you just click on the memories, and anyone can do this. You can put a memory on it's for family members. So if you're, I believe it's just, you can add if you're a family member. Maybe I'm wrong. But so Frederika, a lot of people ended up writing memories after 35 years of her being gone from this earth. They wrote all of their memories that they could think of and put all these down. And I'm so glad they did, because what a wealth of information we got to just read through.
Well, I'm glad they each of their family members did it, because they were usually about one page. And each of them added something even better.
They really did. So it's like, oh, great. She had honey. Oh, she had flowers. Oh, she loved her grandkids. Obviously she did. But then to learn even more about Frederika, I started reading about her mom, because initially I just gave you the charge to just read about Frederika, and I thought, oh, I need to dig a little further. And as I read about her mom, I realized, wow, this is pioneer heritage right here. She started out in Denmark and came to America, and what? And so then I started reading about her and reading about her husband, and it's just incredible. There's so much that you can learn, because these families, they all live together. And what's cool is on both sides of your family, your mom and dad, your grandmothers, they knew each other. They lived in the same area. There's pictures of them together.
Yes.
And so, and initially we were going to talk about Frederika and Bessie together. However,
no way.
The more we read, the more
There's
both
too
of
much.
us went, what? So this is new territory for us. I've never really tried to outline a person's life. I'll try to do it where it's not boring or anything. But I don't think it's boring, because these women are incredible. And Julia is Frederika's mom. Julia was born in 1835 in Denmark. They don't know much about her childhood. That's something that would be neat to find out. And it seemed like she had a unified family, and she got married and had 3 children, and then one of her children died in a stream. Then she met the elders, the missionaries of the church, and her family was really kind of freaked out about that. And so she started taking discussions, just kind of sneaking around taking discussions.
Late at night.
Yeah, what are you up to? And then she was baptized a member at midnight with nobody else there, just in the dark. I mean, well, obviously the ones baptizing her. And her dad threatened to kill her, and some other family members intervened, so she wasn't killed.
And disowned. None of them ever talked to her or even walked with her down to the boat when she was leaving Denmark.
Yeah. So her and her husband and 2 children sailed across the sea, and they ended up in Missouri. I'm sure they landed in New York, walked to
Right.
Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, her husband, is his name Christian? Yeah, Christian Matheson. He turned to her and he said, I'm staying in Missouri. It's up to you. Can stay with me, but if you go to Utah, I'm staying here. I'm sorry. She was heavily pregnant at the time and had 2 other children. And so she took the trek in 1866 across the plains to Utah.
Right. They said the railroad came 3 years later.
It was so close.
Ah.
So she ends up in Utah. She was a very hard worker. She got a job. She was extremely honest. She was dedicated, just showed up. She was just this amazing lady. And then she met Carl Honeck, and they got married, and she was his second wife. And they were in Utah for a while. They had 3, let's see. Oh, then she had Frederika.
Which she went by the name Mary.
Yeah, Frederika did not
We'll
like
tell
being
you
married.
why they got that name.
So Carl was so excited to have a baby, and he was determined that this was going to be a boy. Do you want to tell that story, Mom?
Yes, and he was going to name this son Frederick. And when a daughter came along, he was so mad at that. He called her Frederika. And she hated that name. And in fact, my dad, he was such a tease. He called her Freddie. But most people called her Mary. That's the name that she went by. And so if we say Frederika or Mary, she's the same person.
So
And he was so disappointed
Yeah.
that it was not a son, that she was not a son. He was going to take her to the woodpile and chop off her head. But his wife persisted in keeping him from doing that.
yeah, Julia wasn't going to have anything
Oh,
to do
no.
with that,
Oh,
because
no.
she had already lost a child. She knew what that felt like and didn't want to go through that
Mhm.
again.
It was just like drowning kittens when farmers were old-time farmers. If they didn't want a batch of kittens around, they'd just go drown them. I'm sure it was the same kind of set of mind.
Yeah, and Julia went on to have 2 more sons, and I actually don't think any of them were named Frederick. Maybe, actually, I don't think so. But Carl he was an Austrian man. He was 20 years older. He was very, very hard to get along with. He was
Strict.
not kind. And he
Harsh.
really did not accept his stepsons at all. And if he punished them really harshly, and would, in a way, kind of sell them out for labor. And the boys were so abused that they, at ages 11 and 13, ran away to Salt Lake. And Frederika was really sad because she never really got to see her brothers after that very
Right.
much.
And their father was so strict that he would hold their heads under a trough of water for animals until they passed out. And that was their punishment for doing something wrong. I'm so surprised they just didn't drown, but they didn't.
And that's very lucky. But also, Julia losing a child in a stream, drowning, that must have been really traumatic to her to see that happening to her sons. And yeah, I won't even.
For
So
sure.
they did kind of struggle in Salt Lake. So Carl got some acres in Camas, and he moved there first so he could get the land going. And for 7 years, they were separated. Julia was with her kids in Salt Lake, and then Carl was ready for them to come and said, come on down. And so it was a 50-mile walk, and Julia had 3 children at the time. They were pretty little. I know Frederika was about 6 as well at that time. And so 50 miles with the cow up Parley's Canyon. Now, our cars struggle going up Parley's Canyon. I don't know how they did this. They counted on their milk cow for their food for their trip, and their milk cow dried out. So every time they stopped to sleep, they would beg for milk. And the very kind, generous people would put a big chunk of butter at the bottom of the pail of milk, and so it was a fun surprise for them. And some of the little ones could ride on the cow, and they finally made it. And that's when, everything was happening and the boys were being abused and ran away. And eventually, Julia and Carl separated. Carl went to Salt Lake, and Julia stayed with her half of the land in Camas. And then Frederika ended up getting married, and her and her husband built a house just around the corner from their mom and took care of Julia until she passed on. She died of cancer. But she was a strictly honest, hardworking woman, strong, resolute. She believed in the gospel. She lived it. She had a testimony. She taught it to her children. Just an amazing woman. And I'm so glad that I learned and studied about her. And she raised some pretty neat kids. I'm so glad that Frederika lived, that she never got her head chopped off of the woodpile, right? There's a reason. Because Frederika she was the center. She was the glue. And she had such a great relationship with your dad when he was raised. So Frederika, I'm going on to her really quick. And Mom, you are very welcome to interject. I just really want to introduce these women first, and then we're going to talk. And Mom will get to talk about some things that she learned from her dad about his mom, and just it's so cool. So we know that Frederika was born and into the family, and she lived, and Frederika had a lot of hard times in her life too. When she was 6, pretty soon after they came to Camas, their family got diphtheria and scarlet fever. And her 2-year-old brother, he had heart complications from those 2 illnesses, and he never recovered, and he passed on. And Frederika, that hit her pretty hard. Well, first, before I move on anymore, Frederika was born in 1869. So then her brother passed on, and Frederika grew up, and when she was 10 to about 15, she would work just for room and board because her parents didn't have a lot of money, and they couldn't really afford to feed her. And so she just basically worked for herself so she could live. And then at 16, she met Louis, and Louis caught her eye, and he caught her eye. They got married, and Louis was a very decent man. And so I'm so happy for Frederika at that point that she got to see that men can be very decent and kind and loving. And I'm so glad. And so it was Louis. Louis is the one that grew up probably not even 5 miles from where we live right now in Eagle Mountain. And
right.
That's so cool.
Fairfield.
We went to that cemetery in that whole army area right there.
Yeah.
Just this summer. Mom, that was so cool. You were insistent. Let's go. There might be a grave here.
I thought that he was buried there, but he and Grandma were buried in American Fork. So we've got to look that up now and see where they're buried so we can go there.
Yep. It's true. Okay, so Frederika and Louis built a house by their mom, like I said, and took care of her. And when she passed on, then Frederika and Louis moved to Highland, and they were able to secure some land, and they started up a farm. And the land was so neat because it had already established orchards. They had everything. That's where Frederika set up her beehives. If there's anything else I'm missing, flowers. There were she had it all. And Frederika, she learned how to be a midwife, and she delivered hundreds of babies, if not more, throughout her life. She had many children. Oh, and also, this is pretty cool. One of their houses, the house that they were in, was one of the 3 originals built in the Highland area. It had adobe on the inside and lumber on the outside. It had a fruit cellar, a pantry, and just this beautiful yard and orchard and everything. What a cool place to land at, right, Mom?
Oh, yes. I remember that orchard. And we played and played and played in that orchard and ate cherries and ate green apples. And I never got sick from eating green apples. I don't know what people's problems were telling us that green apples were going to make us sick. Never did it make me sick.
Did your dad end up taking on the land from his mom?
Yes.
Okay, that's pretty cool. We'll definitely get to that.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, I actually didn't write down how many children Frederika had. Do you know how many siblings? A lot.
A lot.
A lot of amazing, wonderful people. Let's see. Frederika had to walk 3.5 miles to church because church was in American Fork and she lived in Highland. And 3.5 miles each way, no matter what the weather. And then finally the Highland ward was built.
Well, I think it was just a branch, and that the
Oh, yes.
branch was disassembled, so they could go to either Lehigh or American Fork or somewhere else. And then after about 3 years, then they got back together in Highland.
There you go. Thank you. So Marvin was 8 years old, and he was Frederika's son, and he passed away with whooping cough. It just, same thing. He just never recovered from that. And so her losing her brother, it's like it prepared her for losing a child. And
Well,
that's
she was
hard.
pregnant,
Yes.
and she was pregnant with a daughter named Marva. I believe she was the last of the children. My father was the youngest. David Strasburg was the youngest son, but Marva was the youngest daughter. And Grandma felt like, so she was so sad because Marvin had died, that she had a Down syndrome child. That was Marva. But she kept her with her the whole time that she was alive. And I never really knew her and found out that she died in 1968.
Yeah, so you were 13 when she
I was
passed
13 when she passed on, and I don't think I ever saw her. I think back in those times it was just, they put them somewhere and you just didn't know about them.
But you did say that Marva really did help a lot as
Yes,
well
her
with the
mother said.
farm, and
Frederika said she helped her do everything.
what a blessing she was for her.
Yes.
Because you'll learn. So Frederika's daughter Kate, she was married and had a son, and she was delivering her baby girl. So Frederika helped midwife, and Kate she just knew that something was wrong, and she said, "Mom, if I pass away, I need you to promise to take care of this baby."
Right. Her
And-
name was Lois.
And Frederika said, okay, well, I guess the doctor didn't take very good care of Kate, and Kate ended up having blood poisoning, and she passed away during the delivery.
No, well, it was 9
Or
days.
right after?
She was 9 days old when she died.
Oh. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't even read that anywhere.
Yeah.
So Kate's husband was fine to just have the son with him, and he kept him, and Frederika raised Lois. And Lois ended up, and Marva helped with Lois greatly. And this was the point where Frederika became the Relief Society president in the new ward, and a couple years later, her husband passed on. So your dad was 11 when Lewis
Right.
passed away.
Mm-hmm.
And so Mom's dad's name is David, and he grew up when he was 16, he and his mom Frederika fully ran the farm. They were really trying to just make ends meet. Marva helped. Lois was growing up, and really the baby Lois, she was helping as well. And so Frederika really did need to take on more midwifing jobs so that she could support her family. And
Well, they supported their family in a lot of ways. And do you want to hear some of them? Oh, goodness, there's a lot.
we have so many fun papers to shuffle through because there's amazing stuff we printed out.
Yes. They sold milk and cream to the dairy, and they had to separate the milk and the cream. Raised chickens for the poultry plant in American Fork. Raised calves. Grew peas, cucumbers, tomatoes by the acre for the cannery. Sold pea silage to the vinery. Grew onions for seed for the Utah State Experimental Farm, and tried popcorn one year.
That's incredible. They were very inventive to just keep their farm going, weren't they?
Yes, well, see, they had to take out a mortgage to pay the taxes, and so they had to do some things to get it paid off, and they did. But my grandmother ended up with a bent back because of the hard work baling from lifting hay bales and heavy things.
Yeah, and just having the whole weight of the farm and her family on her shoulders with her husband passing on
Literally.
early. Do you remember what Lewis passed away from, her husband? I don't remember reading it. Just
I
that
heard Bright's disease, but I don't know what it is.
Oh, yeah, and he wasn't doing well for
liver
a few years
disease.
before, right? Just
Right,
kind of
couple
going
of years.
downhill.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really neat how the relationship between your dad and his mom was, just how close they were and how they were really just trying to survive together and help each other out. And in 1930, Frederika's oldest daughter, she had some mental problems and had to enter the Utah State Hospital. And she had 5 children from 9 years old down to 6 months old.
Right.
And Frederika brought them all in. And this was 12 years before Frederika passed on. So she was already getting old and her back was always hurting. But if you look at behind the scenes, she had her son David helping with the farm. She had Marva helping in the house. She had baby Lois, who'd grown up by then, who was really helping with the kids. A year before Frederika died, Lois got married, and she was the main caretaker of these 5 children, the 5 grandchildren. And so Frederika had to make the really hard decision to put her 5 grandchildren in foster care, and this was 1 year before she passed on. And so in 1942, this world lost Frederika and her mighty spirit, and I'm sure that was her obituary says that the community was shocked that she passed away. Because she did so much as in her church callings with her midwifery, raising some amazing children into amazing adults. And when I love this too, when your dad and mom got married, see, your dad was really close to his mom too, and they lived in the dining room.
Right. Well, he built a home that was about a block away from where their home was.
Do you see a pattern?
Oh,
where...
yeah. Well, I know,
this.
but one thing that I wanted to say, this was something I think from her obituary. Grandma Strasburg was a giver of mental, physical, and spiritual gifts, and she was loved by all who knew her.
Is that what your dad wrote? Or one of the cousins?
Somebody.
I love that. She really was. And you know, Mom, I was raised hearing some things too, just some little stories that you learned from your dad, who learned from his mom. And so I'd like to talk about that, some things that you learned from your dad and from reading about Frederika.
Oh, there's so much, but the 2 things that always hit me, and I never knew Grandma. I wasn't born till 1955, and so I never knew my grandmother Strasburg. And but I heard my father talk about a straight pin, and Grandma said, don't even steal a straight pin, because it will lead to stealing other things. And so don't ever even start by stealing a straight pin. And I have never forgotten that. And then my father, in part of his history, he was walking to school, and he had to walk east to the Alpine Highway to catch the bus to go into American Fork. And he found a can of chewing tobacco on the way. So he decided to try it, and he liked it. And so he used that up, and then he was walking to school again another day and found a full tin of chewing tobacco, and he was up in the barn chewing it or smoking it or something, and Grandma knew. And she went into the barn where he was and made him get down on his knees, and they prayed until my father said, I won't use it anymore, and he never did.
What an example. I love those stories, Mom.
Yes.
She also, as a midwife, she would stay for 10 days with the family, and I feel like her children were very blessed without her there, and they learned very quickly how to take care of themselves while she was gone, because she was earning money, but also she loved the community so much she was out there all the time.
Well, I don't know if she was gone every minute.
No, but when she was, it was for sometimes for weeks at a time, and they
Sure.
were like, "Where are you, Mom?"
Well, because she also helped people that were sick, not just if you were having a child, but if you were sick, she would help. Even somebody got burned really bad, or no,
Someone drank kerosene.
it was the
and she helped.
kerosene. That was
Yeah.
when she helped. A little kid had a scoop full of kerosene, and
He thought
he
it
got
was
pneumonia. And anyway, she helped him to live. Was amazing.
water. Yeah, that's crazy. And something that I read, and it caught my mind because I've heard you say this all the time. She said, "My children are my jewels. My family are my jewels."
Oh yes.
And you always say that, and I say that now. I tell my kids about the straight pin. I tell them that they're my jewels. You see
Yes.
how neat and how important it is as family to teach each other and you pass it down.
That's right. Well, I learned a little poetry, I guess. I don't do that very often. It's called "Our Children Are Our Jewels. We have counted well the cost. May their angels ever guard them, and not one child be lost." That was the theme of all of my grandmothers and grandfathers, was family, and how important they are, and how important it is to teach the gospel of Jesus Christ to them. And I have benefited, and my family has benefited very, very much from hearing these things and loving them, even though I've never met them on this earth.
Isn't it neat? I think that Julia leaving Denmark
Mm-hmm.
with her family refusing to come say goodbye, I think she was very resolute in saying, my family that I grow will be so close with me.
Yes.
And so for her to realize how important family is and how sad she was to lose her big family, her tribe, she created her own, and she taught us how to do it for ourselves as well.
Yes.
I love that.
She was so very blessed.
Tell me about Strasburg Park. It's in American Fork, right?
No, it's in Highland. And it's right by the, not the original Highland Church, because it had burned down. But anyway, it was a newly built church back then. And I guess, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that my grandfather, Louis Strasburg, donated the land to the church for his tithing. And the church made a park out of it, and it's called the Strasburg Park in the Highland area. He didn't do it for accolades, but for his love for our Savior Jesus Christ, and that he was committed to paying tithing. And so that's where the Strasburg Park came from, Louis Strasburg.
Yeah, and see, with donated land for tithing and stuff, the church could have used it for orchards. It could have used it for anything. So he was probably surprised, or maybe they hadn't even made it into a park when he was still alive. Do you remember when it was?
Well,
did your dad ever see it there?
Not with the name Strasburg Park on it, but I think it's just a baseball field right now.
Oh,
We used to have Highland Ward celebrations on the park. And it's a couple of acres of land that's just a park where no homes are, and there's a lot of homes in Highland now.
So reading about these wonderful people, I want to go see their headstones so bad and just go visit the area where they were put at rest for now. And do you know what's neat? There's an app called Billion Graves, and they put in requests, and it's for Family Search and Ancestry.com. They will put in a request for you to go take a picture of a headstone so that the picture can be put on the Family Search and Ancestry so that people can see it. And then they can request that you get the coordinates for the headstone so that people can go and find it immediately. I think that's the coolest thing ever.
Well, it is. And talking about graves, it says that back in the old days, there was no caretaker for the cemetery. So on Decoration Day, which is called Memorial Day now, they would go and weed and and get all the weeds out, and then make it look really nice, and then they would put the flowers from their home on the graveyard. And Grandma said, "Don't walk on their grave." You had to walk around them.
Yeah. Oh, I actually think that's pretty neat that they had to go take care of their own graves, because then they had more pride in that, saying, I'm taking care of you. And,
That's right.
and now it's done for you, and all your flowers get taken away quickly. And back then, I'm sure you could have flowers stay forever, right?
Oh, I think as long as they were, pretty good, but you'd probably have to go and clean them up yourself. But they would take lilacs, snowballs,
Peonies.
yeah, and peonies.
Do you know Frederika's favorite flower?
Roses, red roses.
Red roses.
And her husband Louis loved white roses, and they put them together so that they had red and white roses growing next to each other.
Oh, that is so cute.
Now
Mom.
I want to do that.
Me too. Let's do it. Oh, see, we could do that. And Grandma Holly's roses her favorite were yellow. Do you remember Bessie's?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe
I don't know.
Let's have them all.
I know. Well, I always tried to have all the flowers my mother had, and but some of the flowers that my grandma had were ones that I didn't have, that I didn't know. But anyway, that's way too much.
Oh no, you're fine. Mom, I have a few questions. Are you ready to get to that point, or did you have anything else to add? Because we can. Well, anything else you want to say up to this point?
Well, yeah, let me say this. This is one from one of the nieces or nephews, I'm not sure. My mother took parenthood seriously. This is talking about Frederika, and taught all her children the gospel. It was her desire that we all live good lives. Her husband was an honest man, and she wanted all her children to be like him. Thus, she remained faithful to the end.
And this was about Frederika, right?
Yes.
That is so neat. Oh, and when Frederika married Louis, he wasn't a member of the church.
No.
And tell us about that.
She said she spent 15 years on her knees praying to Heavenly Father to have him accept the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when he did, it was wonderful. And there was this 40-year-old man, a deacon in the church, passing the sacrament with the 12-year-olds. But he didn't care.
I love that. And I'm so glad that he did that and became a member, because, I mean, less than 10 years after that, he passed away. And
right.
So, and their family, they were able to be sealed as a family forever. And he just set their family up for so much success.
Yes, he did. Another, Ray Levere Strasburg said, I remember she was like a mother hen with all of us kids. We never got hurt, but what Grandma was right there to kiss or take care of us. And then he said, Grandma was set in her beliefs of what was right and wrong, but above all, she was loved by everyone, and she had a heart of gold. I think there was no one, relative or otherwise, that didn't think they had lost a very great grandmother and a very good friend when she passed away.
Oh, I love that. That'd be so neat to just read everything we even knew, right? And
but
this is all from Family Search.
I know, but someone else said, Mother read aloud to her family scriptures and all the church publications.
You know what? I want to say, Mom, I dare you to read about any of your family members on Family Search and not fall in love with them.
Oh, I agree.
Isn't that the coolest thing?
It is. And the older I get, the closer I feel to them. Maybe they were there with me saying, yes, it was true, and we loved you all, and we want you to do well. And
I love that. And we're noticing with all of these cousins and your parents, even your mom wrote a beautiful tribute to her mother-in-law. And for all these people to get together and write their amazing memories, we should do that for every person.
Oh, yes, we should. Yes.
Okay, are you ready for some questions?
Okay.
What do you admire about Julia and Frederika and what they went through and who they were as people?
They were both very, very strong women and faithful. I don't mean by bullheaded. They were humble enough to accept the gospel of Jesus Christ and had testimonies. They knew it was true because that's what they taught their children. Even though great-grandmother was disowned, she never talked to her family in Denmark again, and they wouldn't answer her letters. It's very sad, but
and she looked
they
on
knew
the task.
they
of
knew it
walking.
was true. Yes,
She did. She walked across the country, pregnant with 2 babies, with no husband, with faith.
right.
It's, I mean, most of the people these days would be like, I'm good.
Right. Oh, I know.
Let me have the baby first, at least.
Right.
Sorry, I totally interrupted you.
No, you're fine.
And Frederika, what did you admire about Frederika?
Well, I meant both of those women.
Oh, perfect. Because Frederika was with her mom through a lot of the trials, too.
Yes. Yes.
I love that. What's your favorite story that you've read about them so far?
My dad called his mother Freddie.
John and I laughed about that, too, actually.
And that there was a song that she loved called 3 o'clock in the morning. And she loved to dance to this song. And the only thing I can think of is that she was up at 3 o'clock in the morning with one of her children, rocking and dancing around trying to get him back to sleep.
You know, I wonder if there's a song from the 20s or 30s or even the 1910s that I could Google and just see.
Oh, that would be
so
so
neat.
cool.
I'm going to do that.
And then they played the card game Rook. And I even played the game Rook. And what a fun time. And they played the organ. They played hide and seek. They had much room to run and play outside.
Oh, yeah, because your dad, he had a love for the organ because of his mom.
Yes, and they had a swing that went as high as the house. Yeah, the rope was probably an inch thick, so it would carry you that far. And that they had bluebirds on the southeast corner of their home. I love that. I don't know if I've ever even seen a bluebird. I've seen blue jays, but not bluebirds.
We can Google that too, Mom.
Yes.
A picture.
Yes.
I love that Frederika's family, just throughout her life, the grandchildren, you know, she would have big parties on the 4th of July.
Yes.
And just would try to gather everybody as much as possible. And she had the land to do it.
Right.
That's just neat. And she always had honey to give away and
Oh,
flowers to
yes.
give away.
Oh my goodness, they were self-sufficient. They had everything they needed, probably except for money. They had their own meat. They grew their own wheat, and they always just had wheat flour, whole wheat, honey, milk, butter, cheese. She quilted little squares of fabric together and bottled 800 quarts of fruit every year, plus all the potatoes and carrots and turnips and all the things that you put in your cellar. She was a knitter and crocheted beautifully. She had bread and cake and pies that she was expert at, and jam and jelly. I can imagine the shelves in her home were very well stocked.
Oh, definitely.
And
And I'm wondering if any of her kids ever shopped in her cellar.
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Mom, can I shop in your store?
Yeah, you've shopped in our store. All of our kids have.
Mom, what do you think's the scariest thing that they both went through, Julia and Frederika? I mean, that might be hard to pick for Julia, right?
Julia had a lot. I think we've kind of been through the disowning and going alone to Utah with young children to walk across the plains.
Dealing with a really angry, hard husband.
Yes, but they
so
were
much.
probably really forgiving.
Yeah.
Because it didn't turn
kind
them
of
away
the
from the
norm.
church.
Don't you think it was like kind of back then,
Yeah.
just with how much work they had? And
Right.
I don't know.
But I know that they taught us all good, hard work. and that we need to endure to the end with our families.
So what do you think's the first thing you're going to do when you see both of them
Oh
again?
my goodness. Well, it would be the same thing with my own family and friends that have passed on. I would be hugging, crying, and thank them all for the gospel of Jesus Christ in my life and what they've all taught me.
Because if Julia hadn't found the gospel, her daughter Frederika most likely wouldn't have, or maybe, and then your dad, and then you.
Right.
You know, that doesn't seem so far away, does it?
No, it doesn't.
So how important is their example to you in living your own life today?
We are not alone. That we need to have faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, and you can do anything you really want or need to do.
I think the neatest thing too is, you know, most of the time you can say, what would Jesus do in situations? You can also say, what would my great-great-grandma Julia do?
Oh,
what would
goodness.
my grandma Frederika do? Mary, right?
Yes.
What would my grandpa Strasburg do? And now, you know, even now I go, what would my own mom do? And so just the neat examples we have of people that just persevered in this life.
Yeah.
We need each other, and this is huge. And why? You know, if you're down on yourself, go read what your ancestors have gone through in Family Search, and you'll just be like, I'm so grateful for my life that
I know.
I don't have to walk 50 miles through Parley's Canyon to Camas.
It's not so hard in some things, but in other things it can be hard.
It's true. It's like we're almost too soft now, right? We don't have the sunburned skin. And so why is it so important to learn from our ancestors, to learn from their mistakes, to learn from their successes? Why is it so important?
Oh, it's just because you have an example of what you can do. And you hear about the little things in their lives. Like on wash day, they had homemade bread and beans and soup. Can you just smell that homemade ham with bean soup and fresh homemade bread? I mean,
Yum.
those things that you learn about your ancestors, and they love their families. They've been through it all. And we just need to pray for the strength that they had and live worthy lives and endure to the end so that we can all be together for eternity.
I agree. I think, yes, like you've been saying all along, the biggest takeaway is that our family literally is our jewels.
Yes.
They're the most important thing ever. And to just, you know, if you're having a problem with any family member, to just let it go. If you're, you know, not close with someone, try to get close. Try to do all that you can, because we're all important.
Oh, yes, we are. But another thing that I learned from them is they would have homemade bread and milk for dinner. I remember President Kimball had bread and milk for dinner as well. It was just a staple. That grandma made temple clothing, and the green apron that represents the Garden of Eden, she meticulously stitched around the green apron.
That's beautiful. Do you know what I just realized? These two women taught us, without even saying anything but by action, how to have boundaries. Julia said, I'm joining the church, and I'm sorry, family, if you don't accept or love me anymore. I'm still doing it. And then with her hard husband, she separated from him. Mm-hmm. And Frederika, when it was the last year of her life and she literally could not take care of her grandchildren anymore, she made that hard decision to put them in foster care. They had boundaries as well. They were loving, they were kind, but they also very loudly told us we have boundaries, and there's nothing wrong with that as well.
Right. But another thing that I learned, they would have watermelon. Apparently my great grandfather Louis Strasburg grew melons, and people would come from all around, and they would have watermelon for like the 4th of July, probably the 24th. And the milk, and they put it in the Lehigh ditch to keep it cold. And they had seagull lilies, that's the state flower of Utah, roses, tiger lilies, snowballs, bluebirds, meadowlarks, and more. I know that she had more flowers than that. Said that she had flowers growing up along the walkway to her home.
You know, it would be so neat to actually go, if it even existed, to go to those orchards, to go to that homestead and to see it now.
Oh, it's so different. And when I was a young child, I remember that orchard. And then one year, a man came from the agricultural center and told my dad he either needed to spray the trees or he needed to take the trees down. And my dad, I guess the orchard was pretty old, and he decided to take the orchard down instead of have to spray the trees for the worms that would get in the fruit, so that it wouldn't go around to all the other neighbors. And that was a very sad day.
But your dad wanted to stay organic, see? And he was like, no.
I'm organic. I don't spray anything on my stuff either.
That's why your gardens, all the fruit from your gardens, and not fruit, but vegetables taste so amazing, Mom.
Yes. Did we talk about the ice cream?
No.
Oh, my goodness. For the 4th of July, they would go to American Fork and see the parade, and then Grandma would buy a big block of ice and bring it home, and they had ice cream in an 8-quart ice cream maker, and sometimes they had to make 2 so that they could get all the ice cream they wanted to eat. And I'm telling you, my dad loved ice cream, and he sure passed that on to me.
And ice cream back then was really kind of a rare treat too.
Oh yeah.
And so everyone just loved that.
Right. And for Thanksgiving and Christmas, they only got an orange and an apple. Well, no, I guess they had apples.
Well, those were all in their stockings.
Right. They had an orange. I think once a year they got oranges.
Oranges, and I think nuts too.
Yes. Christmas was, really a true Christmas.
And also kind of stressful on Julie and Frederika, because they did struggle with money so much that they did their best.
Oh yes, and they didn't want for anything.
And there was one year that the bishop dropped off a ton of coal for Frederika so that she could heat up her home, and what a blessing.
Yes.
Oh, we have the most amazing family. Is there anything else you want to say, Mom? Because, I can't wait till I can hug these two and just say thank you so much for your example. And I really can't wait to read more. I want to go and read more about their children, any of them, and just...
Yes.
Oh.
It's the thing is that their faith carried them through. And their prayers. I know it with all my heart, but they wanted us to have the gospel in our lives. And we have it. And I'm so grateful and so blessed.
Thank you.
Love them so very much.
Me too. I agree. This is proof right here. See, Mom, you didn't know very much. You did a little about Frederika, but not a lot. And here we are, really learning about these two women from a source that we all have access to. It is so, we're so blessed.
Yes.
Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank
Mom,
you.
Thank you for joining us as well. I look forward to doing this more. Next time will be Grandma Bessie, and man, did she, you knew Grandma Bessie. Oh, some of these stories for her, you'll fall in love with her as well. Love you guys. We'll talk to you later. Bye.